Hey, good morning. How you doing? Good, good, good. I'm going to go ahead and offend some of you as I get started, all right? Here you go. I'm not a huge hockey fan. Oh, thank you, thank you. Not a huge hockey fan. Listen, it's kind of boring on TV. It's great to go see it in person. I will say that, but I think the reason is I didn't grow up around hockey. Right? I grew up in North Carolina. We didn't have the Hurricanes till many decades after I left North Carolina. So the people that I grew up with, they didn't play hockey. They didn't talk about hockey. We didn't go ice skating. We went roller skating. And so I really don't know or didn't know a whole lot about hockey. So it's not one of my favorite sports that are out there. That being said, I believe hockey players are some of the most gifted athletes that there are. Because you think about what a hockey player does, okay? First, they play on ice, right? They play on ice. They wear these shoes that have blades, literally blades of steel on them, that if you've ever gone ice skating before you play hockey, like they're off-centered, and I don't understand that part. Like it always feels like your ankle's about to bust when you're out on the ice rink ice skating. But they're wearing these strange shoes with blades of steel on them. They have this stick that, I don't know, kind of looks misshapen for what you're doing. But they're using this to slap at this little round 6-ounce rubber puck, while at the same time trying not to be pulverized by a large Russian man named Boris, right? Like hockey is really, really hard. And if you're a hockey player, and maybe some of you play hockey or played hockey in the past, if you're a hockey player, you really have to be in control. And you have to be in control of your whole body. You have to be in control of your feet and your legs and your arms and your hands. This stick that you're holding as you're chasing this puck around. You have to have this incredible eyesight and peripherals to make sure you're running away from Boris as fast as you can. I mean, there's so much that you have to be in control of when you're playing a sport like hockey. And so I think hockey is one of the hardest sports to play. But it's all about control. And this morning, we're going to talk about control. Not about controlling when it comes to hockey. We're talking about controlling this thing called our tongue. If you're brand new here, we are in this 12-week series. It's all on the book of James, which comes out of the New Testament. What we've done is broken it into 3 smaller series. The reason we've done that, if you read the book of James, he kind of jumps all over the place and has different topics that he hits. The last 5 weeks, we talked about some specific topics. I just hit one a week. But this week, we start a 4-week series. It's all about our mouth. It's all about the words that we say and how we control our words, because our words have power. And they have the power to hurt, and they have the power to encourage. And so today, we're going to talk about how do we control our tongue. So we're going to be spending all of our time today in James chapter 1. If you have a Bible, you can turn there. If not, we put the words up on the screen. If you follow along on our app, you can open that up and also take notes through that. James chapter 1, starting with verse 19. It says this: "Understand this, my dear brothers and sisters. You must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Human anger does not produce the righteousness God desires." That passage from James, if we put that into practice, could change the world, right? If we learned how to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Now, what is James talking about? He's talking about conflict. Think about conflict when conflict happens. There's a couple of things that I think take place. First, we want the other person to hear us first, don't we? We want to be able to speak first. But the second part of this, not only do we want to speak first, we want them to understand what we're saying. And oh, by the way, we also want them to know that we're right and to change their mind to believe just like us. But that's the conflict, right? Because that's exactly what this other person is doing. They want to be heard first. They want you to understand what they're saying, and they want you to go the direction that they believe is right. And so this is why we have conflict in our lives. But if you think about it, what we really need to be better at is listening instead of talking. Epictetus was a Stoic philosopher. He said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Maybe there's something to that. Maybe that's why we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. But when we are slow to listen and quick to speak because we want to be heard, that always leads us to conflict. And where does conflict go from there? Well, James tells us, doesn't he? It leads us to anger. Now, we have to remember something when we're looking at a book like James from the Old Testament. It's actually a letter that James writes. And as we look at this letter that we have here, remember James's audience. He's writing to these Jewish Christians, okay? He's writing to these people who are Jewish in their background, but they have become followers of Jesus. And so he's writing into their time period and what they're going through at that particular moment in history. So as he says these words, why would that have hit a nerve with them? Well, I think there's a couple of reasons for this, actually 3 reasons that this is pretty powerful for James to say. The first one is, this is a group of people that are facing religious tensions. I just told you they were Jewish Christians, which meant that they grew up Jewish. They grew up following the laws and the rules and the rituals of the Jewish faith. They grew up believing this Messiah was going to come at some point in time. For thousands of years, the Jewish people have been waiting on this. For this group, they believed the Messiah had come, and it had come through Jesus. And so now they were following this Messiah. Jesus was a part of their lives. And so they really had this new identity because they were now following Jesus. They were Christians. They were Christ followers. This, however, was creating this religious tension, these religious conflicts in their lives. Their own communities, their own families were rejecting them because they were following Jesus. Their families and the community were like, no, the Messiah hasn't come yet. Like, Jesus isn't this Messiah. Why are you following him? And so it's creating this conflict religiously within people they cared for and loved. You throw into this the Greco-Roman paganism of the day. And that said, hey, you've got to worship the emperor. Like, that is our Lord. That is our God. That is our Savior. And so there's this religious piece of tension that is there too. And so here you have these now followers of Jesus who are having these internal conflicts because of all these outside religious pressures that are there, right? And this is coming into the church. Do we keep following the Jewish laws and rituals? Do we show allegiance to the Roman Empire? Do we allow Gentiles into our churches? Do we stop following Jesus and due to the outside pressures that we're facing? I mean, these are the religious conflicts that they have going on in this point in time. And so James is writing into this fact, into this religious tension that is there. But another piece to this is they're also facing political turmoil. As a Jesus follower, they had this very thin line that they had to kind of waver around. There was this Roman Empire piece and the allegiance to that. There is the Jewish community that is a part of what they're struggling with when it comes to their politics. In terms of the Roman piece, you kind of had to be careful who you vended to. And so there were Roman taxes that you were upset about, or there was a Roman leader that you didn't like very much, or Roman policies that you didn't care for. Like, you didn't know who was still a part or connected in some way to the Roman government, to the Roman leaders. And so if you said something to the wrong person, I mean, you could quickly be arrested, and it's potential no one would ever see you again. So there's this political turmoil because of the Roman Empire that's in place. But it's also, again, back to the Jewish community. If you're familiar with the Jewish faith and the politics of that day, like, they were intertwined, right? They were a religious, political community. The laws and rituals that they had were their politics of the day. And so many of the Jewish leaders that were in place at this point had actually been put there by Roman leadership, Roman officials. And so here they are in these roles of power within this religious, political context, right? The Jewish community, and yet they still had allegiance to the Roman Empire. So again, even in your inner circles, you had to be careful who you were talking to, what you were venting about, because easily, again, you could be arrested and taken away. And so here's James, who's again speaking into the political conflict that's happening in that day. There's lastly the economic hardship. We've talked about this already in this series a few weeks back, that in those days during the Roman Empire, about 60% of the population lived in poverty or below. When you look at the makeup of the early church, it's thought that most of the people that were in the early church came out of this poverty, that 60% that was out in the real world, probably higher than 80, 90%, maybe even more of the people that were in the church lived in poverty themselves. And it was just the economics of the day, right? but a big part of it was the exploitation and the oppression by the wealthy and the rich. And so you're struggling just to make it day to day. But something else has happened. These Jewish religious leaders are now persecuting those people who are following Jesus, who used to be Jewish, because they're following this new guy, right? They're following who they think is the Messiah. And so they begin to persecute these Christians, these Jewish Christians, who decide the best thing for me is to get out of town. And so they scatter. They leave Jerusalem. They leave that area because of this fear. Well, what did they leave back in Jerusalem? Jobs, money, family, friends, support. They end up in these other towns. They end up in these other cities, these other regions. They don't have that anymore. They don't have their job. They don't have that family support. They don't have their friends that are there, because some of them are actually against them because they still believe in the Jewish faith that the Messiah hasn't come yet. And so they're now trying to figure out their economy of the day, their economics, because they don't know where else to turn. And so there's this conflict when it comes to where they are financially. All this is going on, right? This is what James is speaking into when he writes this letter to these new Christians. This identity that they have through Christ is bringing about religious persecution. The politics of the day, man, they're living in fear because they don't know what might happen to them. And then just add in their financial situation. How are they going to survive day in and day out? I mean, life is tough. And so James writes into this, okay? But imagine you are these people. Kind of be hard not to be angry, right? You're going to be upset because religion is after you. Politics are scary. You're trying to survive day in and day out. And guess where this anger is ending up? It's ending up in the church. It's seeping into the life, into the culture of the church, and it's causing friction. Because when we're angry, what do? We say things we regret. Ambrose Bierce, in his book, The Devil's Dictionary, says, "Speak when you're angry, and you will make the best speech you will ever regret." It's true, right? When we're angry, we say things that we regret. And so in the midst of this conflict, in the midst of this friction that's happening within the church, James writes these words: "Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." James is like, hey, your response to what's happening around you, your response to religion, to politics, to the economic conflicts that are there, your response, it should come from the faith that you have through Jesus. And he says, but I got an idea for you. Here's how you deal with this. Look at verse 21. "So get rid of all the filth and evil in your lives and humbly accept the word God has planted in your hearts, for it has the power to save your souls." Here's James. He says, you want to fix this? Here's what you do. Get rid of all the filth and evil in your lives. Thanks, James. That really helps us out, doesn't it? It doesn't, does it? So what is James getting at here? Well, the Greek word for rid, it means to take off, right? Like to take off your clothes. It's easy to take off our clothes. But what does James say is easy to take off? He says the filth and evil in your lives. That doesn't sound very easy. What is James getting at here? He actually uses a medical phrase right here. And it's kind of weird, but it's the buildup of wax in your ear. Parents, your kids probably at some time, or if they're little, probably sometime will come up to you and say, I can't hear. It feels like I got something in my ear. And the first thing you're going to do, you're going to go look, okay? You're going to make sure it's not a bean or a peanut M&M, a Lego. Our son Jake had a Lego stuck in his nose one time, which they had to pull out at the doctor's office. But hopefully you've never had to experience any of that before. But if your kid comes up and you're like, I can't hear, and you look in there, it's like there's not a Lego in there, how do you deal with that? You get a Q-tip. And you take the Q-tip and you stick it into the ear, you move it around a few times, you pull it out, you look, you're like, oh, that's nasty. But there's a miracle that takes place, doesn't it? Because the next thing you know, your kid's like, oh, I can hear, this is the best day ever. Well, it's because there's been this buildup of wax in their ear. Why is James saying that? Why is he saying get rid of the wax that's in your ear? Well, because his audience was missing what God was saying. He's like, you can't hear God. Like God wants to speak to you, but you can't hear God. Your ears are so closed. You have the proverbial wax in your ears. You're more interested in what you have to say and what you believe and what your thoughts are than you are listening to God or even listening to others. So no wonder you're so angry. You can't hear what God's saying to you because you're just thinking about yourself. Clean out your ears so you can hear. What are they supposed to hear? Well, James tells us here. He says what God has planted in your heart, right? The God's Spirit is inside of you. It's in your heart. That's what you need to be listening to. You know who you are. You know who you follow. You know the teachings of Jesus because we've shared those with you. Now let those teachings grow. Let what's been planted in you, let it grow so you can finally become who God has created you to be, who God desires for you to be. Now, again, something else to remember about what we're reading here. James isn't talking about people or talking to people that are far from God. He's not talking to people who don't know Jesus, right? He's talking to the early church. He's talking to these people who are followers of Jesus. He's saying, remember who you are, and you are called to be different. Let's kind of pause here for a moment, and let me speak to those of us who are followers of Jesus, because I wish I could say we're really good at living out what James is saying here. The reality is we're not. I think for many of us that are followers of Christ, we've kind of bought into a system that says, like, I need to be heard. Like, what I have to say is right. What I have to say is true. I need you to listen to me first because I'm going to prove to you that I am right and you're wrong. I don't think we understand the influence that attitude has over other people, especially those who are far from knowing Jesus. And so when we're around people who think differently than us or believe differently than us or vote differently than us, and when they don't listen to what we have to say because we feel like we need to say it first, what takes over? Anger takes over. My theology is right. My politician, my platform, my party, they're right. My views on immigrants and the poor and the homeless and the helpless, they're right. You're wrong. You need to come to my side. Let me tell you why you're right or why you're wrong and I am right. That's not who we are called to be. And I think sometimes those of us who say we're followers of Jesus can be some of the biggest reasons there's so much conflict around us today. If you don't believe me, go online this afternoon. Or better yet, don't. But look up topics like religion, politics, things that are happening in our economy and see what pops up. Look and see what people post, right? And not just look at what people post, but look at the comments underneath that and look and read what people are saying. I mean, sometimes there are people like, yeah, I agree with you, that's great. But a lot of times it's like, no, that's terrible, it's horrible. Let me tell you why you're wrong and I'm right. And there's this conflict that begins there on some social media site. Then click on that person's profile who's starting this argument. See what you see. I am amazed at how many times I'll see a Bible verse, or someone will say I'm a child of God, or someone will say I'm a Christ follower. Like so often the conflict that we find, I believe, comes from those of us who say that we are followers of Jesus. And we post these things online and we don't remember, we don't think through the influence our words, not just verbally, but what we write and type, we post, the power that it has over people. That those of us that are supposed to be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry, are slow to listen and quick to speak and quick to become angry. And I think if we look at James, and if James were to be here today, and James were to talk to us today as followers of Christ, James would say, clean out your ears, right? Get rid of those things that are tearing this world apart, that are tearing apart your families, your friendships, the church, your relationships, your reputation, like the hate that you have, the anger that's there, these caustic words that you keep expressing, the sarcasm that we use that's actually meant to hurt other people, all are causing conflict. Get rid of that. Get rid of that anger. Remember who you are. James actually gives us a word picture to think about this in verse 22. But don't just listen to God's word. You must do what it says. Otherwise, you're only fooling yourselves. For if you listen to the word and don't obey, it's like glancing at your face in a mirror. You see yourself, walk away, and forget what you look like. But if you look carefully into the perfect law that sets you free, and if you do what it says and don't forget what you heard, then God will bless you for doing it. There's all kinds of mirrors, right? We have makeup mirrors that make your face real big, but you can look up close as you put your makeup on. We have full-length mirrors in our homes probably, so maybe you order a new outfit online and you put it on, you go look at yourself like, hey, this fits great, or no, I need to return this. There's fun house mirrors. You go to a fun house and these mirrors contort your body in all kinds of different shapes and sizes, and those are kind of fun. There's rear view mirrors in our car. We can look at those and see where we've been. We can see who's behind us. And then there's side view mirrors that are optional living in the DMV, right? Yeah, especially if you're a Maryland driver. But beside the point. Mirrors are an important part of our lives, and we use them every single day in many different ways. But we understand that they are a reflection of our reality. Like this week, I looked into the mirror many, many times. Not to do makeup, don't wear makeup. Not to do my hair, because as you can tell, it doesn't take long for me to take care of my hair. But I can look in the mirror, and then I can walk away, and I can tell you exactly what I look like. I can sit up here today and say, hey, let me tell you about all the flaws on my face and the bumps and the spots and how big my ears are and my nose and what my mouth looks like. I can tell you everything about my body. The mirror's not here in front of me, but I remember exactly what I look at like. I remember every part of my body because I've looked at this mirror so often. James steps back into verse 21 here, and he reminds his audience, like, you have all these teachings from Jesus that are planted in your heart. You know the way to live. You know the way to react. You know the words that you should say. You know how you should live your life. So why aren't you living it out? Why aren't you living out what's planted in your heart? Why are you speaking before listening? Why are you getting angry at things you can't control? Have you forgotten who you are? Have you forgotten who you follow? It's like you look in the mirror and you don't forget what you look like. Remember, you're a reflection of Jesus. Don't forget what's been planted inside of you. And James takes all of this and he says, let me show you how this works best. Look at verse 26. He says, if you claim to be religious but don't control your tongue, you're fooling yourself, and your religion is worthless. Pure and genuine religion in the sight of God the Father means caring for orphans and widows in their distress and refusing to let the world corrupt you. If you can't control your tongue or the words that you say, your anger towards others, I think James is saying, then why do you even say you follow Jesus? Because you're not living a life that says you follow Jesus. Because the words that we use tell people whether our faith is real or not. And so when we can't control our tongue, it leads to destroyed relationships. It leads to destroyed reputations. It leads to destroyed homes and families and workplaces. It leads to destroyed churches. But what we say, or because of what we say, tells others what's truly planted in our heart. Even Jesus talks about this. One of his teachings in Luke chapter 6 says, what you say flows from what is in your heart. Here is James who says, remember what's been planted in your heart. Be different. Choose something else over the anger that everybody in the world wants you to think is normal. It's like, that's not normal. Be different. But how does he say to be different? It's kind of strange what he says here. It seems a little bit out of place. He says, if you want to know what pure religion is, genuine religion is, take care of orphans and widows. What is he talking about? Well, we need to go back to the context of when he is writing. And it actually goes back to the religious, the political, the economic tensions of that day. In ancient society, orphans and widows were the most vulnerable people there were. They had no safety net. They had no social security. They had no welfare. They had no organizations that would take care of them. Religious leaders didn't care. The political leaders thought they were just taking up space. And then when it came to the economies of the day, they were just left alone. They had to figure out how to survive on their own. And many of them, whatever's the worst thing you could think that you would have to do to make money to survive, that's exactly what they would do, because they were just trying to live day by day. So here is James, who's directing this audience that are in these conflicts within the churches, talking about their own economics, talking about the political the system that's in place, talking about the religious issues that are there. He's saying, hey, why don't you stop thinking about yourself? Because that's really what it was. They were focused on themselves. He's like, you're focused on this desire to be right? To be right about your theology, to be right about the politics of the day, to be right about where you are when it comes to your finances and surviving and the economy that you're living in. James says, why don't you do something different? You've got this thing planted in you, God's Spirit. Why don't you put that Spirit, why don't you put that faith that you have in Christ, put it into action? Like, live out what's planted in your heart. Control your tongue. Walk away from those unnecessary conflicts. And by the way, you're just getting angry, right? You start this dialogue and you just go back and forth and you're just getting angry at each other, and that's not helping anyone. It's definitely not helping the church that you're a part of. But use what's planted in you, God's Spirit, to do what? Not to keep talking, but he says to help those who need help. That's why I love this quote from St. Francis of Assisi: preach the gospel at all times. When necessary, use words. Sometimes we think the only way that we can spread the gospel, the only way that we can influence people's lives is through our words, but oftentimes it's actually in what we do that speaks the loudest. How am I living out my faith through my actions towards others? How am I living out my faith through my actions towards others? Genuine religion, the pure religion that James talks about here, it doesn't mean show up on Sunday mornings every week here at the Journey. Doesn't mean be in a group, doesn't mean give and read the Bible and pray and serve. That's not what James is saying here. He's saying, hey, true religion is when we're actually changed, right? When we're transformed, when we're different than society around us. Now, don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean you don't show up on Sundays and are in a group and you serve and you give and you pray and read the Bible. Those are so important to our spiritual life, but only when they help us change, only when they move us to being transformed. Only when we begin to use those things and live out that faith through our actions towards others. And so for James, living out this faith that's planted in your heart through these actions, for him, he's like, that's what true religion looks like. That's what pure religion looks like. That's what genuine religion looks like. You are putting your faith into practice. You got so much better things to do than to fight and be in conflict. Go and help those in need. Now for us today, we could definitely say helping orphans, helping widows is a great thing to do, but in our context, it's probably a little bit broader than that. I think it could be helping the financially struggling neighbor, especially in moments like right now. It can be just being present for that scared immigrant family. It could be being helpful to that tired single dad, or being there for the unmarried pregnant young woman that you know. The true religion is living out our faith in action towards those in need. But before we can get there, I think there's a few things we need to work on first. And these are the things that we talked about already here in James. So let me share these three things with you. Here's the first thing I believe is so important for us to do. We need to clean out our ears. What's God telling you that you can't hear because your ears are full of wax? What's that one topic that you have right now that just, man, it has you so heated that you just can't stop thinking about it? What is the one thing that you're so mad about that you can't hear God speaking to you? Or you can't even listen to the perspective of someone else because your ears are so closed. This is crazy to me because here's James that was written 2,000 years ago. Here we are 2,000 years later, right? Has anything changed in 2,000 years? Like the things that we still have conflict about, the things that we are still struggling with, the things we're still angry about, the things we're still mad about, I don't really think they've changed in 2,000 years. And yet, we're still mad, we're still angry, we're still hateful, we're still using words that we shouldn't use, that we regret after we say them, because there are these differences that we have with other people. And because we have differences doesn't mean we close our ears. It may mean that we've got to become better listeners. But we're afraid, right? We want to take sides. We want to make sure that we're not going to get lost in whatever shuffle there is. We don't want to lose face. We don't want to lose hope. Maybe the first thing we need to do is clean our ears so we can hear God's Spirit in us, so that we're more open to hearing what others have to say. Second thing I would say is look in the mirror. When you look in the mirror, what do you see? And I don't mean what do you see physically looking back at you, because we already know what we look like. I'm talking about who you are on the inside. When you look in the mirror and you see the person looking back at you, do you like that person that you see? Is the person that you see there, are they always angry? Do they think they have all the right answers? Does this person speak before they listen? Is the person looking back at you, are they truly following Jesus? Because when we look in the mirror as a follower of Christ, we're supposed to be reminded of something, right? We're supposed to be reminded that God's Spirit is planted in us. And if God's Spirit is planted in us, we know the right way to listen. We know the right way to speak. We know what our reactions should be like. We know that we shouldn't get angry at everything that comes our way. We need to learn to control our anger, even when things are different. Even when people think differently, believe differently, vote differently, have different ideas than us. Maybe what we need to do is clean out our ears so we can hear God's Spirit talking to us, and then look in the mirror and remember who we are. Because as a follower of Christ, we are a child of God. Clean out our ears, look in the mirror, and then lastly, control your tongue. We live in an age of hot tweets, sub-tweets, 24-hour outrage news. And if we say that we are a follower of Jesus, one of the best examples we have for other people is how we use our tongue, is controlling the words we say. And so let the words that come out of our mouth, let them come from this place of faith, because God's Spirit is planted in our hearts. And we have this incredible faith in Jesus. We believe there's something more than the world sees. And we want to spread that. We want to share that by the person that we are, by controlling our tongue. While at the same time, everything around us tells us what? Be angry, be mad, be bitter. Like, this is the person you're supposed to be. And here's James just saying, no, control your tongue, control your words, because in today's society, that's countercultural. And in James's society, that was countercultural too, because Jesus was countercultural. Jesus said, hey, you're not going to be like everybody else, because you're going to follow me. You're going to be different. You're going to have my Spirit planted in you, and you're going to live a different life. And that means you're going to be different than the culture around you. When we are followers of Christ, we watch what we say. We're careful with our words. We control those words. We learn to control what we say, because it has the power to influence the lives of others. James says, remember. Right? Remember who you are. Be a reflection of Jesus in the world as you live out your life. Not because you want to get into a fight, not because you want conflict, because you want to live out this faith in how you treat the world around you. James says, remember what's planted in you, because what's planted in you has the power to save you. And it has the power to save others. And again, what's planted in us is Jesus.